Hey everyone, my name is Bryon Howard. I'm a Calgary realtor who has sold an average of a house a week since moving to this great city in 2003. And this is Calgary Living. I'm interviewing Calgary's top performers as it relates to living and lifestyle in our great city. Some of the podcasts will be real estate decision specific, but most will be about life in Calgary and why we choose to live here, or at least why you should visit. Thanks for tuning in.
Well, folks, welcome to another edition of Living in Calgary. Today, I am excited to have Marcello Detto. Say that for me correctly, Marcello.
Marcello
Detto, born in Calgary. I'm guessing we can guess where he came from originally with his parents, Italy, originally, I suppose, or grandparents, landing in Bridgeland originally, but you never lived there. I recently met Marcello through our mutual Facebook group, Altador Bulletin Board, where we're neighborly and live close by. And I was interested and curious about Marcello's most recent venture and his newest and latest book, the fifth that he's written, called Driven, about the life of taxi drivers and the stories they hear. Am I getting this right so far?
Yeah, well, it's more about the lives of the drivers themselves. Their secret lives.
Oh, there's secret lives. Okay. Marcello, just to sort of begin with, you were born in Calgary.
Yes.
What strikes you about living in Calgary?
Wow. My affection for Calgary seems to wax and wane. There are times where I love this place and I'm proud. There are times that I not so much. I'm engaged in the politics in which tends to let me down, to be perfectly honest, as someone on the progressive side of things. But I feel I'm a Calgarian and I'll still stick up for this place at the same time as I'm cursing it.
Exactly. And this is an interesting kind of show and topic because our show is called Living in Calgary and Real Estate and Lifestyle. And you sort of said, hey, Bryon, I'm kind of interested in your show and maybe interested in being and maybe promoting a little bit my new book, Driven. At the same time, I don't think I'm your guy because, I'm not real excited about real estate. For me, it's a place to sleep. Well, not quite your words, but maybe tell us a little bit about if you don't mind, about your love and maybe hate relationship with real estate in Calgary. Can we explore that a little bit?
Sure. I don't know if I either love nor hate Calgary real estate. I'll tell you though, as someone who grew up in Calgary, and I think long-term Calgarians would agree with me, there's this north-south divide, right? And I was a north kid, right? I grew up in the Northwest in Thorncliffe and then Sandstone. And, other than to go to downtown or go to the Stampede, we never crossed into the South. And my friends who grew up in the South, same sort of thing. They never went to the North, right? All of the movie theaters they went to was in the South. All the shopping malls was in the South. And we never crossed the Bow River, right? And sure enough, my first property that I owned, my then wife and I had bought a condo in Kensington and then a quarter of a fourplex in West Hillhurst. And then we bought in Alton. And for my family, it was like this great betrayal that I'd crossed the Bow River to the south. And they would talk about coming to visit us as if it required like a passport and like a vast, the vast journey. And, Marda Loop is not far from, North Calgary. It's not that distant, but just having the S in front of the W made it feel like they would have to get their vaccinations and update their passport before they could come visit me. But yeah, like I said, we had a house in West Hillhurst and moving to Marda Loop. It was not just the north-south divide, but I really loved my time down on the river on the north side. But I've been here now for about close to 10 years and I love Altador. I do.
I recently helped a couple of buyers buy in Marda Loop, Altador area. And they both grew up in the north. And I actually told them, I've only lived in Calgary for 20 years, since 2003. And I guess that's not 20 years, is it? It's almost 20 years. And I actually told them, hey, you're not allowed to come to south, like south of the river. Like, what makes you think you can buy in the south? Because they both grew up in the north of Calgary, like not that far, not like somewhere like Sandstone, I think. And it was kind of a joke. Do you have any idea why that is like that in Calgary?
I don't. I really don't. Maybe it's because, you go to school and the catchment for students, it never crosses that north-south line, right? I never went to school with anyone from South Calgary. It was always nearby. And that's the neighborhood we knew. And like I said, if we needed a movie theater, we'd go to Market Mall. If we needed swimming pools, we knew where they were, all that kind of stuff. and so we never crossed over until I got into high school when I was on the wrestling team. And that was the first time I would cross over for like tournaments and competitions. And it was this whole other world that exists on the other side of the river, which is ridiculous. Let's face it. It's totally ridiculous.
It is totally ridiculous.
But there was a psychological thing. And like I said, even my family feels the same way. I'm the only one of us living in the South, current still. And everyone's like, it's such a strange place.
It's still like that. Right? Maybe I want to get into Driven a little bit and, your career. But before I just jump into that, can you tell me a little bit about this whole north-south Calgary? How about the boom-bust economy of Calgary? You're a longtime Calgarian. Sounds like you grew up in central Calgary and still live here in this area. And I think you're a similar age to me. So you saw the boom and bust of like 1982, 83. And I imagine your dad was going through, and your family, uncles and stuff had all kinds of big mortgages at high interest rates. And then we saw the real estate prices start to increase in about 1996. And then that lasted rolling to 2006, 7, 8, boom, boom, boom. And then a big bust. And then we started to see some recovery in 2011. And again, another boom in 2013 and 14, of which it's only been sort of bad since then. And then in this more last 3, 4, 5 months, or actually 3 months, we've seen another first time since 2014, a good market for sellers. How does the boom bust, how's that affected you in your life as a longtime Calgarian, similar age to me? How do you cope with that, Marcello?
It's interesting because I was not aware enough about it in the 80s, right? I was just a kid. I wasn't paying attention. But as an adult, I had kind of 2 jobs as an adult. I'm a writer and I've been doing that for about 20 years. And before that, even since I was 15 years old, I was working in restaurants, starting as a busboy at a Boston Pizza, going all the way to fine dining. And it's been a few years since I've done that work, but those have been my 2 jobs. And both of those, even though they're not directly related to the oil patch, it's all connected, right? It was these times where you wanted to make money when you could. When the restaurants were busy, often young men with expense accounts were throwing money around on steaks and wine, right? Mm-hmm. And also on the other side of things too, when magazines were flourishing and there was opportunities for freelance business and this kind of stuff. And so even though I'm outside of the patch, I've gone through all of that here and there and affecting my own personal kind of income. But I don't think that the boom days are not coming back the way they did before, right? The idea that if people think that we're going to wait for the next oil boom, I think that's foolhardy and just not sensible planning. I think our economy will recover somehow, but the idea that we're going to be awash in petrol dollars again, that's a bold prediction. I think that's just an obvious fact for those of us who want to admit it.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, I agree. You've been a writer and, for being a writer, you're introspective and thinking all the time. Before we hit play on this show today, I asked you a little bit about one of your books on Palestine and a little bit of your thought process of what's going on there right now, but more about Driven. Tell us a little bit about Driven. Tell us about the premise of the book and what caused you to write this book.
Yeah, all my books up to this point, my first 4 books have been about faraway places, right? I wrote about West Africa. I wrote about Iran. I've been to Palestine, as you said, kind of big trips that I would go and collect stories and come back. A couple of years ago, I started to realize, well, what am I missing here? What stories am I missing on the cab ride to the airport, to go on those big trips? What are the stories I'm missing from the back seat? And you think about what a strange space a taxi cab is, right? Because I can't think of any other place where you are so physically close to a stranger for so long and exchange so little, right? Typically you get into a cab, you blurt out your destination, and then you stare at your phone and scroll through your Twitter until you get to the place. Maybe you ask the guy, how he's doing, how's business, whatever. For the most part, though, we don't get stories, right? Mm-hmm. And I was just wondering, as a writer, what am I missing? And so I spent a little more than a year traveling around Canada, meeting with drivers and sitting down with them in places where they're comfortable and not in their cabs. I don't want to interrogate them from the back seat. That didn't sound like a good method to go about, but I would meet them where they're comfortable, and which often meant Tim Hortons, or I'd also know in their living rooms and in their kitchens and wherever, and just got a sense of who are these men and women? Where did they come from? What were their lives before they ended up behind the wheel? And the stories I found were just incredible, of men and women who had endured and survived war from overseas. One man who escaped from behind the Iron Curtain with his family during the Cold War. I met a Holocaust survivor. I met a man from Sierra Leone who lost his leg in the Civil War and started a amputee soccer team back in Sierra Leone. Amazing, amazing stories, surprising stories, things that I never thought I would find. And it was so much fun to meet these drivers. And I'm so grateful to all of them for sharing these incredible stories with me.
Fascinating and interesting. How did you happen to pick as you traveled across our country, and how did you happen to pick drivers, or like, did you jump in a cab and say, start to engage, or did you get referrals? How did you choose your subjects?
It was certainly more referrals. It would have been highly inefficient to just jump in cabs and ask for stories, right? Not everyone wants to talk. And why should they? There was a lot of like friends of friends who knew a cab, or someone who might have been mentioned in a newspaper at some point. I would kind of chase them down. At first, I tried to go through the companies themselves and say, hey, I'm this writer and I'm looking for great cabbie stories. Who can you introduce me to? And that almost never worked. And I think because, these drivers are busy. They don't have time to sit with me, and they're dispatchers. They don't care. They don't care. And what should they? Of course they don't. So it was referral. And every time I meet someone, I'd ask, well, who else should I talk to? And so I ended up kind of tracking down, I think there's about a dozen in the book, but I think I talked to probably about 20 different drivers and then got their life histories.
What a great premise, as you were saying, how, we jump in our cabs and generally in the back seat and the cabs in the front. I mean, especially in the last, I guess, more than a year with COVID. And I kind of think a little bit how things have changed. So I was curious and interested in your story, Driven. I drove a taxi in 1991, I think, in Whistler. And my idea about driving that taxi was, being the guy I am, was looking to make as much money as quickly as possible and work as little as possible so I could ski a lot. And that worked out really well for a season at the Whistler Blackcomb. But I found that I'm always kind of been a curious guy, and I could get into some pretty neat conversations as a taxi driver back then with folks that had no idea who I was, or, where I was coming from or anything. And that was fun. These last, 10, even 15 or 20 years, when we jump into a taxi with our cell phones, and like the conversations don't happen like they used to happen 20 or 30 years ago, because there's like, we can work from anywhere, whether it's, the back seat of a cab and stuff, which is, kind of unfortunate, but I guess we all know how the world has changed. Tell us a little bit about sorry, go ahead.
Sure.
Maybe comment.
And not just work, right? We can entertain ourselves with that phone, right? We don't need the driver to engage with us, because we can just scroll through our Twitter feeds. We can check our Facebook, right? So we don't need to engage.
Right.
And to be fair, not all drivers want to engage either. I think I would be in such trouble by the nation's cab drivers if everyone started getting into the back seat and started demanding to hear the life story of the guy behind the wheel.
Oh yeah.
Right? No, they don't want to tell that story. I think this year with the drivers, it just taught me not just about cab, not just about the drivers, but all Canada, about how everyone we see, everyone we pass, every stranger we even have the momentary engagement with, whether he's a cabbie or she's a woman pouring our coffee at the Tim Hortons or bagging our groceries or whatever. Everyone has an epic story, right? Everyone's life contains multitude, to use a cliche. And in a way, it's almost, I feel just comforted by the fact that we're always surrounded by these grand histories, that everyone's gone through something, right? We should all realize that we share that with everybody, whether we're in the back seat or the front seat.
Marcello, it's an honor for me to have this time with you. You're a writer, you're an intellect, you're a thinker. What's it like being a writer these days? And tell me a little bit about your goal in publishing this book and how we can help as an audience. Like, how can we support you as, our neighbor here in Myrtle Loop, Altadore area in Calgary? And what can we do to support Marcello and where you're going with this book?
Well, I mean, read and buy books, right? During the pandemic, one of the few businesses that have done better has been independent booksellers. I think being trapped at home, people have kind of upped their reading game, right? And people are buying a lot of books. And so that's the best thing you can do to support your local literary community, is just, buy and read their work. I think every book for a writer, we want the same thing. We want to increase our readership. Writers here in Calgary and in Alberta, sometimes it feels like we are very regionalized, right? We might be well known within the small confines of our city or province, but no one's ever heard of us in Toronto, where the industry is centered, right? An Alberta writer always wants their book to hit big out east, and so that's the kind of thing that we hope for. That's a cool, cynical business answer. But as a writer, as someone who tries to create something on the page, I just want readers to engage with and enjoy it. My work does not exist without your eyes on it.
Mm-hmm.
I love seeing my book in people's hands. It's just a beautiful thing.
Wonderful. Well, and how do people get the book? What's the best way to support you in me going out and buying this book? How do I do it?
I would love for if everyone bought their books at independent bookstores in Calgary. Owl's Nest is the one closest to our neighborhood, right? Shelf Life Books down there on 4th Street by Memorial Park is one of the great supporters of the literary scene in this city. We should throw our money at them. They are so wonderful to writers. Pages as well, and their new I think it's called Next Page in Inglewood. So yeah, buy books from your indies if you can.
And now, what about if people want to reach out to you directly? Is that a thing? Would you like that? How do people?
I'm on social media like everybody else, right? So you could find me easily on my Twitter and my Facebook author page. I have a website, marcellodetto.com, that I very rarely update, but it's there if anyone wants to reach me that way. Also, I'm launching Driven on Thursday evening. We're launching virtually on Facebook Live and YouTube. And Mayor Nenshi is hosting the event. He's going to be interviewing me. I'd interviewed him a couple times for a couple of different things. So it's going to be nice to, he's got to return the favor now.
Well, I'm going to tune into that for sure. What time does it happen on Thursday? 7
o'clock Thursday, yeah.
Perfect timing for my Thursday evening plans right now. And I will try and get the show published before, for Wednesday, so that our listeners can maybe tune in on it as well. Marcello, do you have any last ask for our audience today? Requests?
Yeah, nothing to do with me or the book. Yeah, my request: get vaccinated and stay home.
Very good.
Please do.
And the reason why we're doing this on Zoom today, and I have my vaccination, and you do too, I suspect.
I do.
Yesterday, I got home from a showing, and I was with 4 people. And none of them had been vaccinated. And 2 of them were just slightly older than me, and 2 of them were in their early 30s. But it's kind of embarrassing. Yes, I agree with you entirely. Marcello, thank you so much for being on the show. I look forward to picking up my copy of Driven at my local bookstore, Owl's Nest. And,
thank you very much. Appreciate that.
And I look forward to Thursday's virtual opening on Facebook Live. I'll be there.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me on the show.
Over and out.
And I